Hi, this is Reno Lovison, executive producer at ChicagoBroadcastingNetwork.com, an eclectic Chicago lifestyle podcast and media blog showcasing multicultural and age-diverse people engaged in the performing arts, publishing, local events, and business. We hope to show and tell you about Chicago from the perspective of those of us who live and work in the Windy City. My guest today is my good friend Regina Harris Baiocchi. She is indeed a virtual Renaissance woman, an author, a music composer, and founder of the Haiku Festival based right here in Chicago. And Regina is also the founder of 6 Degrees, a Chicago-based collective of women composers who represent a variety of different musical traditions. And I've had the good fortune of being able to video record 6 Degrees on many occasions, on several occasions, and also many of Regina's recordings as well. So, Regina, why don't we start right there? Why don't we start this conversation by talking about music?
Talking about music. Okay. Well, if you want to talk about 6 Degrees Composers, I founded the organization in 2010. So this is our 11th year that we're going into. So I'm really very happy about that. And the name came from the fact that when I initially started, we had 6 members. And so 6 members, 6 composer members, 6 women dedicated to writing, producing new music, and also advancing the music of other women. And it's something that I wanted to do because there's a void there. There are a lot of concerts that are dedicated to men, a lot of organizations dedicated to what I like to call museum music, music that you would, that you hear on the radio, everyone knows it. I love Beethoven, but I don't want to hear the Fifth Symphony every year, and I don't want to hear the Seventh Symphony every year. If I'm going to program Beethoven, I'd like to hear some of the things that are lesser known. And
Mm-hmm.
I think he would want it that way too.
Well, he was
I,
lesser known at some point.
exactly. People don't realize, for instance, J.S. Bach,
Yeah.
if had it not been for Mendelssohn, we wouldn't even know who he is. And he was the choir master, and the setting that he wrote in was such that if he repeated a piece, the pastor would come up to him and say, "What's going on? You played that last week. I don't want to hear that.
Mm-hmm.
We want to hear new music every,
Well,
you know."
that's a good point because you just hit the phrase I was thinking about is new music. And I
Mhm.
think it sort of answered my question in a sense is that the thing I wanted to ask you is I always have trouble when I'm trying to describe what it is, for instance, that 6 Degrees does, because it's not popular music in the sense of pop music. It's not top 40. It's not your traditional commercial music. So what is the
Mhm.
term? Is the term new music? Is it what do you say when you're talking about what we used to call serious music, and a lot of people just defer to classical music, when it's something that's more, I don't know, esoteric. What do you think? How do you describe it?
Well, for openers, I always say 6 Degrees Composers. Really, when you look at us, there are, when you look at especially the original members, 3 of us wrote popular music. I write pop tunes all the
Sure.
time. I
Yeah.
write jazz, I write gospel, I write blues. I'm classically trained, but I grew up in the oldest Black Catholic church in Chicago. My grandmother played organ at Robert's Temple Church of God in Christ on 40th and State. That was a church where Emmett Till was buried.
Wow.
So, I mean, you're talking about, I come from a long tradition of Black popular music. From time I was 4 years old, I sang in the girls' choir, and that was at Metropolitan Church. So even though I was, member of the oldest Black Catholic Church, I had relationships with African American churches, AME Church, which is African Methodist Episcopal Church, with
Sure.
Baptist churches, with COGIC, COGIC, Church of God in Christ. So those people really incorporated a lot of what you would call popular music in their services. They
Hmm.
would never admit it, because it's the devil's music. But
Yeah.
I would defy you to close your eyes and listen to some of the music that you hear in those churches, And you would think that you're listening to Motown.
Well, it was a secular sound, though, being
Absolutely.
adapted or to a more sacred environment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
So
in Chicago, I'm working on a project now where I will point out that Chicago was the first city in the world to use a Hammond B3 organ within the context of
right.
gospel music. And most of the time, when people think of of a Hammond B3, they think of gospel music, but they definitely think of jazz.
Sure.
So, 6 degrees, I
Well, rock
guess,
and roll too.
absolutely, any kind of popular music.
Yeah.
But I guess when you talk about 6 degrees, the bulk of the music we write is something that we learned in the academy.
Mhm.
Very few places teach popular music. Very few academic environments teach gospel music. So we are classically trained, most of us.
Mhm.
And then we bring our culture with us. Obviously, I bring my African American culture. Esther Hanviria Punt brings her Filipino culture and also culture from Thailand. Kyung Mi Choi brings culture from Korea. Janice Miserelle Mitchell brings probably what could be described as Italian and Irish culture.
Mm.
Patricia Moorhead definitely brings Irish culture with her. Ann Ward was steeped in African American tradition. And it's interesting.
Sure.
Ann and I were talking before she passed, and we were driving in her car, and I said, "Oh my goodness, there's Metropolitan Church on 41st and King Drive, big red brick church." And I said, "Oh man, I used to belong to a choir there when I was a kid." And she said, "Did you?" And I said,
Mhm.
"Yeah." She said, "Me too." And I said, "Was it the girls' choir?" And she was like, "Yes." But when we were members of that choir, it was not uncommon at any given time for them to have 1,000 members.
Oh boy. Wow.
So I mean, you could be in this room with Ann Ward, and not know that she was there.
Sure.
But
Even a choir, though, with even a couple hundred people who,
absolutely,
and even 100 people. I mean, you don't always get around to everybody. You don't, especially when you're kids. You stay within your little clique, your little group sometimes.
that's
So
right.
I
And
think
and
it's
you know
great.
what, adults too.
Yeah,
But you're
sure.
right. You could
No,
be
and I could think in terms of, as I remember, her music definitely had a more of a gospel and African vibe to it, as I remember.
yes.
Um, Janice Miserable Mitchell, of course. I always think of being avant-garde, and then we've got some people who are definitely modern and postmodern in their vibe. Maybe I need to stop
Yes.
trying to put you into a box, but the only reason that I want to put you into a box is just that I'm always grappling for the language. When I go to say, well, hey, Regina, my friend Regina, she's a composer. Oh, what does she write? Well,
Well,
she's kind of all over the
I
place.
can give you some perfect verbiage for that. And
Okay.
by the way, I don't think you can say the name of Ann Ward without saying AACM, the Association for the Advancement of Creative Musicians, which
Okay.
was founded right here in Chicago by Muhal Richard Abrams and a few other guys. But I was always taught that there are really only two types of music: good music and bad
There
music.
you go.
So I
Okay.
would hope that when you talk to people about my music, you say, "Oh, Regina Harris Baiocchi writes good music."
Cool.
But as far as labels are concerned, you can always have a genre discussion. And of course, that means obviously talking about blues or gospel or jazz. Classical music, if you, with a capital C, obviously, and I shouldn't say obviously because it may not be obvious to all of our listening audience, but classical music with a capital C refers to the classical period.
That's
Classical
right.
music
Yeah, I
with a
know, and
small,
that's
right, with a
yeah,
small C
sure.
could be any time. A lot of people like to call it concert music.
That's a good one.
A lot of people like to call it serious music.
Mhm.
Though to me, serious is, and you always get into these class
Right.
words. And serious to me
Serious
insinuates that,
discounts everyone else. It's like we're
exactly,
serious and you're
right, you're serious and
fluff.
they're
Yeah,
not.
no, that
Not
and that was
cool.
sort of a something you and I heard probably growing up. It was something in the maybe late '60s and '70s. You'd hear people talk about serious music.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think concert music or classical music, but even concert music. I mean, you can be in concert with uh, Nine Inch Nails, but
I
but
like new music though. I mean, that's what sort of triggered me right here. Is I sort of like new music in the sense of, it because it means that it's not classical with the capital C. And it's funny that you mentioned that, do you want to hear Beethoven's Fifth again or something? But, it's one thing, as you know, I do a lot of theater reviews too. And, Chicago in the theater community has a reputation for always loving to, you can always sell a musical in Chicago. People love to see the same things over and over again. And I have to say I fall prey to the same thing sometimes. But,
I think
trying
we
to get
all do.
yeah,
I
trying
think
to
we
get
all
new
do.
work so sometimes is hard to get people out of their comfort zone, because we like the familiar. We like to go back to what we know and want to hear the tunes that we love and so on and so forth. So breaking people out of that mold is a challenge, but
Excuse me.
you have been doing a good job of it. 6 Degrees is one of those efforts that helps people. It challenges people to listen and consider other points of views when it comes to music, to listen to something new, and I might say add exciting. I've heard a lot of exciting music. I came to it totally blind. You invited me to come, and you hired me one time to record a concert, and I didn't know what I was stepping into. And many concerts later, I have become quite a fan, and I look forward to
Yay!
them as well, and happy to promote them. So let's move on just a little bit and talk about Farafina a little bit, because since we're talking about a particular piece of music, I've come to learn that the word Farafina means land of the black skin,
Mm-hmm.
correct?
Yes.
And it was a fun project for me to work on. When you Was that the debut at Hot House? The when you did Farafina, was that, or had it been played?
No, it was a video debut.
Just
So
the video.
Farafina had never had a video before.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you invited me to put some images together with that song, and I'm proud to say, as I said to you when I finished, is one of those rare times when you do something and you stand back and you go, "Wow, that's really good. I'm really happy I did that. I'm really happy with what I did, and I'm happy, to see how our visions came together on there." So, and I just came to love the song. No one has listened to it any more than I have. When you do a project like that, you listen it over and over again, and that's true of all your music. I've listened to it more than probably even Greg has.
You probably know it better than I do.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
I'd like to say a couple things. First of all, going back to that new music term,
yep.
and I'll just be brief here. In 2020, 6 Degrees joined forces with New Music Chicago.
Mhm.
So we are not only our own entity, but we are also a member of New Music Chicago, pretty much for the same reason that you talked about, because we are doing the same types of things. The difference is New Music Chicago has men, and 6 Degrees Composers only has women members.
Mhm.
But anyway, so Farafina, Farafina is interesting. I presented this at University of Indiana South Bend last summer. No, it had to be summer of 2019 because it was pre-pandemic. And one of the first things they said to me was, "Oh my God, when you look at the words, it's can be very sad because it was a piece that was inspired by the brutal murder of Laquan McDonald." They said, "But the music is so upbeat and engaging," and I never really thought of it that way. I know that sometimes I have to make a conscious effort to write happy music.
Mm.
It's very, I love writing sad music. And I guess, I don't know, maybe I'm a sad person, but sad music to me is more interesting to write. And when you look at some of the big Wagnerian pieces or some of the big pieces by someone like Florence Price, generally it's the pieces that are filled with turmoil and overcoming that turmoil that are more interesting than this la-di-da tiptoe through the tulips kind of stuff. I
Mhm.
don't like writing that.
Mhm.
And that kind of girly music is what they expect women and girls to write. And I can do that. I mean, if that's what I'm hired to do.
Yeah.
Um, but with Farafina, I think what happens is that musically, there's so many emotions that are expressed. And when you're telling that kind of story where you're talking about all of these people who are either related to the Black Lives Movement or who have, who lived in that era, that's some pretty sad stuff. You know,
Well, yeah, and let's set this up a little bit because then I'm going to play a little piece of it. But and and interesting that you say people who lived in that era. Well, I mean, unfortunately, we live in that era.
that's right.
You know, Farafina, I'm glad that you mentioned what you did about the sort of sadness of it. What I really think is complex and interesting about this tune, and again, our listeners will be able to hear a little bit about it, so I want to set it up for them, is that it has this undertone of sadness. It's not in your face sad. It just, you know, it has an upbeat rhythm. It has a very interesting rhythm to it. It's a kind of a what's the word I'm trying? An anthem in a sense,
Okay.
but at the same time, it has this undercurrent of sadness, and I think that that's the message. You know, at least it's the message to me is that you know this is an ongoing struggle, and it's sad that it's an ongoing struggle. I'm going to talk about more about it when after we've listened to it, but for the listeners to understand, it's a 9-minute piece. I'm not going to play the whole 9 minutes, but I am going to play the first couple of minutes just to give people a flavor of it and get a sense of how it goes. So go ahead, and if there's anything you want to say while I set it up.
I wanted people to experience what I was feeling standing in my window. I had just had surgery, so I was on crutches. And I wanted people to experience what I felt looking out my window, watching all of these marches in downtown Chicago, and thinking, you know, wow, I went through this as a kid. My parents went through this. My parents' parents went through this. And I could probably trace my heritage all the way back to the first time that, you know, my people were drugged here across the Atlantic Ocean. You know, we've been fighting this fight for 400 years. I'm sick of this, you know, and I just wanted to be the voice of people like Laquan McDonald and Eric Garner and Sandra Bland and Rakia Boyd, you know, people who didn't get a chance to speak for themselves. You
Well,
know,
let's
it's
talk about it some more after we listen to 3 minutes.
okay, sounds good.
You know where you've been. Do you know where you're going? You know where you've been. Can you find your way home? Your Baba laid your tracks, and your mama's got your back. So keep your eyes focused on Farafina. You know where you've been. Do you know where you're going? You know where we've been. Can you find your way home? Your Baba laid your tracks, and your mama's got your back. So keep your eyes focused on Farafina. The world saw you feed Look 169s. We heard Eric gasping, I can't breathe, as our Syrian babies washed the Turkish shores. Our souls cried mercy, our fists pounded no. The world saw you come like a thief at night, as Mother Emmanuel's 13 prayed. You bowed your head with them, then you pulled out your gun and took everybody to Kingdom Come.
So that song, listening to it again just now, I mean, I got chills again listening to it. And of course, I like my podcasts to be evergreen in the sense that you can listen to this a year or two from now, and it has content that will be valid. I'm hoping that. So I want to avoid talking about the fact that it is too valid at this moment with what's going on in the news today. And I hope that somebody listening to it 2 or 3 years from now will see that this is something in the past. But unfortunately, it's not. It's what's going on. So, but I love the sort of African rhythm to it. I love the jazz sound of it. As I said, it has there's this undertone of sadness, but there's also this hopefulness that I think if somebody listens to the whole 9 minutes will eventually see that it does get hopeful towards the end, but always
Yeah.
still with that little bit of sadness.
Hmm.
That's the reality.
And that's the nature of a testimony, which is what I was trying to do.
Yeah.
Because you want to tell the story, you want to tell the truth with the hope that it doesn't have to be relived. Because you can teach lessons. You can teach someone that fire burns without setting their hair on fire.
Yeah.
You can teach people that, racism is not good for anyone, without being a racist towards them. But some lessons are harder to learn than others. And some people just hold on so tightly because I always remember that the person, the racist, the bigot was taught that by someone who loves them.
Mm,
And when you're taught something by your mother or your father or someone that you hold in high regard,
sure.
why would you take a stranger's word that it's really to the contrary?
Yeah.
You know, we're among the lucky ones, the blessed ones, because our parents saw what the world was and told us, you know what, this is the way it is, but hey, this is the way it could be.
Mm-hmm.
We could be better. We could be better people. But the only way you can make that claim is if you're open to knowing that no one's perfect right now. This is not a perfect representation of ourselves. So, things happen by revolution or evolution.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think we're in that slow grind evolutional stage, and we've been stuck here for a while.
Yeah. And it's not like we haven't made progress, but there's still so much progress to be made. And, this is our life to live now. And people want change now because they want it in their own lifetime, you know.
Hmm.
So thank you for that contribution to the world because I think it's a song that deserves to be heard. And I hope that more people will hear it. So
I
there's
hope
the
so
message.
too. And
Yeah.
I have to say something about the words. My mom would always say, you know where you've been, but you don't know where you're going.
Mhm.
And if you say that to a 7-year-old, it's like, oh, what is she talking about? It's like I just want to get my ice cream cone or whatever it is that you're
Yeah.
trying to do. And then, of course, neither of my parents are here. And I think about some of the things that they said to me, and a lot of them have ended up in song lyrics because they were such good lessons. And that was kind of like the impetus for Farafina. Who knows, when they leave home in the morning, you always think you're going to come back home.
Mhm.
I'm sure Laquan McDonald, when he was skipping away from Jason, I can't even think of his name. Um, anyway, when he was skipping away from the Chicago police officer, never dreamed that this man was going to shoot him in his back 16 times. I think because I was recuperating, I read everything about this case, and if you just look at his story, it's just the saddest thing in the world. And it's not just Laquan; it's all of those stories.
And you bring up the thing I found, that's very powerful is in the middle of the song, you recite, roughly 30 names of
Yes.
victims of racial uh, profiling. And the really sad part of that is that between the time that you wrote the song and the time that I worked on the video, I had to add about 12 or 15 more names that weren't in the original part of the original song, that weren't, that I put in there as graphics that you don't recite because they weren't in the original. So the point is that this unfortunate situation continues.
And you know what, Reno, it's not just what happens in American cities when people are victims of gang violence or police brutality. You know, just the fact of these Syrian babies washing up on the Turkish
that
shore. These
too,
people, I
right?
mean, it's like, you know, these people are just trying to live their lives as freely as they can. And for the world to witness that and not be brought to our knees. That's one good thing about this pandemic that I was hoping is that, you know, because everyone had to be forced to take a time out, that we would, you know, really look in the mirror at ourselves. And, you know, you keep hearing all these, you know, things about hitting the reset button, but we could really do that if we wanted to. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? There's, you know, so
Well, so these are obviously issues that are too big for you and I to tackle at this point. I think all you can do as an artist is shine a light on it. There are people who have the power who need to take action to make things better. And all we
And
can
I
do is,
think you just summed up Farafina. You know, I wanted to write something that would spark conversation.
yeah.
And so it's not just about Black Lives Matter, that's at the core of it, but
Mhm.
it's about injustice everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere. And
Hmm.
it's systemic, it's age old, it has been and will continue to be with us in some form. But we can only hope to make things a little bit better. So, well, with that in mind, I was going to go right into things change, but so you also wrote two songs, which I'd like you to talk about a little bit. That again, thanks to you, I had the opportunity to work on the video version of it. One was things changed. The other was
Hmm.
Journey. My plan is that we'll talk about Journey and play a couple minutes of that during this conversation, and then at the end of our podcast today, I'm going to play Things Change as we
Okay.
go on to the podcast.
This is Reno Lovison, executive producer at ChicagoBroadcastingNetwork.com, reminding you that you're listening to a conversation between me and Chicago composer Regina Harris Baiocchi. If you're thinking you'd like to make music of your own, check out LakeshoreMusicStudio.com, offering piano lessons for all ages, currently offering online piano lessons. As always, if you need audio or video production assistance for your business or organization, check out renoweb.net. Now back to our podcast.
Tell me a little bit about Things Change and a little bit about Journey. Tell the listeners a little how did they come to be and what's that story?
Okay. I love Twitter and I'm on Twitter a lot, probably a lot more than I should be. And most of the people that I follow are composers, musicians, poets, writers, people who do things that I do. And then, you know, of course, I read the usual, you know, news stuff that everyone ingests. And so Miriam Capion is someone who she and I were following each other. And there have been a couple of people who have commissioned me to write music as a result of our following each other on Twitter. And she asked me if I would be willing to write some music for her choir. And I said, sure, I'd be happy to. And she was really surprised because, you know, again, a lot of composers, you know, they don't like writing music for non-professional musicians, you
Mhm.
know, because you're classically trained in the academy and all of that other nonsense, you know, the highbrow stuff. Anyway, and it's interesting because over time, I think you'll see that the music that has the longest shelf life is the music that is written for the people and
Yes.
is performed by the people, not, you know, somebody in an opera house,
Yeah.
because lyric opera could care less about what I'm writing. Maybe one day they'll see the error of their ways.
Not to mention that you have written what, two or three operas.
Well, I've written
We
one
won't
opera
spend too
for
much time on that, but we will mention
right.
it.
So I
Yes.
have written opera, yes. But anyway, so I said to Miriam, oh, sure. So we started talking about the things that you talk about when you agree to write music. How long is it? What are the kids, you know, what is their level of, you know, competency? What do they like to sing? And so she sent me their last performance, and it was something that was done after the pandemic. So you've got these panels of photographs with all these little kids singing, and I don't even remember what they were singing. I just remember saying, "Oh my God, I'll pay them to write music," because I was just so taken by them. I love children. I love little kids.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so I was to write a song, singular. And so I think I may have written Journey first. I'm not sure. And again, I looked at it and I said, this is kind of reflective. It's not kid friendly enough,
Hmm.
I want to do something else. So I wrote Things Change, and I really wanted to do, I like that little lilting piano where you kind of feel like you want to dance to it kind of thing.
Sure.
And both of them were aimed at teaching lessons because that's, the kind of music that I grew up singing, as a kid. And I mean, I grew up during the Motown heyday, so I sang all types of things, but in a classroom setting, it was generally something where you were teaching yourself a lesson. So Journey is about, your journey in life and what's going to happen when you get to the end of your life.
Hmm.
So it kind of reminds kids to, hey, make the most of this. Have fun as a kid, have fun as an adult, and be ready for whatever phase you get to. And then Things Change is pretty much self-explanatory. It just talks about the only constant in life is change, you know. And so I just wanted to, write two songs that kids could be playful with and have some fun. And I have fun, and I think they did too.
Yeah. Oh, they were great. I will say again, you recommended me to the teachers who were putting the concert together, and so just for the listening audience to understand, this was a virtual concert that these kids were doing because they're all under quarantine during the pandemic and working from home. And so in Journey, each of the kids sang their piece listening to a click track, and
Yes.
then they sent their video into their teacher. They videotaped it themselves or
Hmm.
with the help of a sibling or their parent. They sent that little clip to their teacher, and then their teacher sent the clips all to me. And
And they're in Arlington, Virginia,
and
and
they're in
we're in
Arlington,
Chicago, Illinois.
and I'm in
So
Chicago.
that's
Yeah,
another.
yeah. And they sent me their 50 clips, and I stacked them up and put them all together and synchronized their voices and got all their pictures on the screen as best as I could. And I think it came out really, really well. Unfortunately,
Yes.
podcast listeners will not be able to see it, the video, but you will be able to hear a little bit of it. And as you said, I love children's voices. I think there's something just so honest about them,
Yes.
and they're just so. And these kids, the first time, I think I told you, the first time I listened to, I was literally hysterical. I'm not kidding. I was slapping myself to keep from like laughing, and it was laughing not at them, laughing and just like it was just so adorable, you know.
And you know what? The
And,
listeners can see it because if they go on the Six Degrees Composers website, which is
yeah,
6degreescomposers.com,
there's a link there.
yes.
Okay, I'll put the link on.
And it's on our YouTube. We have a YouTube channel.
Okay, well, I'll put it on the Chicago Broadcasting Network,
Okay.
the post page where this podcast will be living. Will have a link, or I'll try to embed it if I can. So, but let's
Okay.
take about 3 minutes and listen to Journey.
When we get to where we're going,
I think it's important for listeners to understand this is not a children's choir. This is a choir of children, I like to say. This is just, these are random kids as part of a class. They're not, they're
Right. It's a general music
not an
class.
elite, it's a general music class. It's not an
That's right.
elite chorus. So,
It,
but again, as I said earlier, what tickles me, what I really enjoy is the honesty of it, and it is a kind of a folk song, I guess. Is that okay to call it that?
sure.
I mean,
That's as good as label as any.
yeah, simple. I'm putting labels on everything. I can't help it.
That's okay. I don't mind. I mean, I don't mind it being called a folk song because this is a general music class. This is like any other gen ed class. Everyone has to take general music.
Mhm.
So your point is well taken. Everyone who walks through the door is involved in all of the activities in that class. So they want to introduce kids to something with the hope that either they will pick up a hobby for life, or maybe they might be inspired to become a music teacher or a professional musician.
Or maybe just the opportunity to lift your voice in song, which
That's
is
right. That's right.
mentally uh,
Cathartic.
satisfying and cathartic.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
And
Mm-hmm.
and most of us do not get that chance enough. I find that people love to do that.
Mm-hmm.
This pre-COVID, I had an opportunity. I play guitar. I do folk music.
Oh, okay. I didn't know
Basically,
that.
yeah. I mean, I'm camp counselor guitarist, basically. Uh,
Uh-huh.
but I have been invited by a few friends, to that put together parties because there's a lot of people in our age group. They want to sing some of the old songs and some folk songs and rock songs and things like that. And so I've done a few sing-alongs, and
Oh,
I just think it's great, because people just want that opportunity to as they say, lift your voice in song. People maybe don't belong to a faith community, uh,
mm-hmm.
or some other opportunity, which is often where people get that experience. So it's nice to just have a chance to sing, and I think for the kids to do that. And when I was a kid, I loved music class. I loved the opportunity to sing. So anyway, I really connect with them in that way. When we finish, which will be shortly, because we're doing a podcast where we don't have to fit into any particular length, but I do want to wrap this up in a bit, and we will finish with things change. Before we do that, though, the two things I want to do before we just have a little Chicago fun before we finish up, but just to plug the Haiku Festival and tell us just a little bit about that, what it is and how it fits into the Chicago scene and into the world and national scene.
Well, Haiku Festival is a something that I founded for children. My love for children, and basically, Haiku Festival offers poetry readings, workshops, and special events for kids. And we celebrate children through poetry while promoting literacy. April is National Poetry Month. So here we are, April 1st, 2021, and it's the beginning of National Poetry Month. And we invite kids from all over the world to submit poetry. It has to be 575 haiku because it makes it easier for us to judge the haiku, so that we're looking at apples versus apples instead of apples and oranges.
Mhm. Could you,
And
I want to interrupt you for a second because I think it's important for listeners who maybe are not totally up to speed on their haiku format.
okay,
I'm more
sure.
than most because again, I sat through
You
your
sat
seminar
through
that I
my
recorded.
programs.
So
Hi,
I should
okay,
have gotten a certificate, I think.
we can do that. We can give you a certificate. So
So
haiku is a Japanese art form, and it's basically a 3-line poem. The first line is 5 syllables. The second line is 7 syllables, and the third line is 5 syllables. A total of 17 syllables, and that's important to remember because this is our 17th year. I founded Haiku Festival in 2004. So we had a lot of activities planned around the number 17. I had been working on it for a couple of years, and then the pandemic happened. But thanks to Northern Illinois University, they're going to try to recreate everything that I planned this fall. So we won't be able to do everything during National Poetry Month, which is now because we're still, have to be socially distanced. But we put out a call for poetry every year, And this year we got poems from many, many more cities. Normally, our poetry, the bulk of it comes from the tri-state area, Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin. We always get poems from literally all over the world. I mean, my favorite is when we get poems from places like Haiku, California.
Ah,
And my dream is to be able to offer, some kid who wins first prize, that he and his family, three other people in his family, get to go to Haiku, California for a week for some of the haiku festivals. But for now, we offer cash awards. So the top prize is $100 when we for as far as the competitions are concerned. And in previous years, we give that's first prize per age group. Then second prize is usually $50. Third prize is $25. So we give three $100 prizes, three $50 prizes, and so forth.
okay.
There's a Gwendolyn Brooks Award, there's a Founders Award, but more importantly, each kid, like this year, we got 1,023 poems.
Wow.
In good times, all 1,023 kids would be invited to come to Harold Washington Library, which is the main Chicago Public Library downtown, and they would get up on stage, read their poem, and they read it twice because haiku is so short.
Mhm.
And it's always videotaped by Can TV, and they run it year round. And these kids are just so excited to see themselves on TV. And we also have, because I'm a musician, we feature child musicians, children musicians.
Mhm.
So we've had solo violinists, we've had solo cellists, we've had solo pianists, and we always end the program with the taiko Japanese hand drums because it's just so energetic. And I love loud music and I love percussion music.
Sure.
And it's one place where a family can bring their strollers, they can bring their newborn babies, and they can bring their grandparents. It's always a family friendly show. We always have a professional guest poet. We've had people like Sonia Sanchez, Chris Abani, our poet laureate of the state of Illinois, Angela Jackson, was a guest poet one year. And so it really is a festival. And it's a culmination of the whole year. Usually in October through March, I'm going around to all of these schools in the tri-state area. I'm teaching workshops to teachers, showing them how to teach kids to write haiku. And I'm teaching workshops to kids, showing them how to, write better haiku. I give them formulas. I have all kinds of haiku games and books. And it really is festive. In the early days, we had a pizza party after the festival. And, now we can't do that,
Sure.
not, because of the pandemic and everything. But it's just poetry has always been a part of my life. And I have to say that this was inspired by Gwendolyn Brooks, because
Mm.
when I was 7 years old, my mother took me to the Museum of Science and Industry, and Miss Brooks had a similar program where she would meet any kid in the country who wanted to come. It was usually kids in the city, and you went up and you read your poetry, and she opened her pocketbook and gave kids money, prizes.
Oh
It's
my
not like she had
God.
underwriters or anything. I mean, at least I have some donors.
Yeah, yeah.
But when I saw her take that money out of her purse, that just meant so much to me as
Um,
a kid. And when she passed, I talked to her daughter, Nora Brooks Blakely, and to Hakeem Matabuti, who's like her cultural son.
mhm.
And I asked if anyone was going to take up that, mantle. And no one was really interested. They're not really poets. And I thought it was something that I could do. And here we are 17 years later.
There you go. So she passed it forward, and you're passing it on. That's great. That's awesome.
And I hope
So
someone else,
do you have a haiku for me today?
you know what? I always have a
I know you
haiku
do. That's why
because
I didn't even tell you ahead of time. I'm springing it on you.
I write every day.
I know
And
you
I
write.
just,
You
I
write one
just
every day, right? Yeah.
Oh no, at least one.
Yeah.
Plus, I'm in a ranga right now, which is related to haiku. I just love micro poetry, so haiku, tanka, ranga, all of those.
Mhm.
Let me see if I can read a nice family friendly.
Yeah, there you
Let's see. I'll read this one. I inherited great grandmother's old soul as my first hand me down, and I'd like to read it again. I inherited great grandmother's old soul as my first hand me down.
go. I love
And
it.
that's a poem that I have been rewriting for years. I actually wrote it that I inherited my first brother's soul, because I have an oldest brother that I never met because he died before I was born. And this time it was recast using my grandmother's soul. I think we all have pieces of our family in us, and we'll pass on pieces of ourselves to the next generation.
I think that's
So
awesome. And certainly you do a good job of that, sharing your music, sharing your poetry, sharing your writing and your books and so on. So let's wind this up with a little bit of Chicago fun. And because this is Chicago Broadcasting Network, and you interjected a lot of good Chicago stuff in here. So a little Chicago background. What schools did you go to?
I went to Hardigan Elementary School, which is on Root and State. Root Street is between 41st and 42nd Street on State Street, the Great Street in
Yeah.
Chicago.
Cool.
And then I went to St. Elizabeth's, which is the oldest Black Catholic church in Chicago. And they had a school and a high school, it was like K through 12.
Mm-hmm.
So I graduated from there. And then I went to St. Mary Springs Academy in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, and fish out of water. It was an absolute culture shock. My dream was to go to Dunbar. And so my father allowed me to transfer and go to a public school as a little Catholic girl. No religion class. Yay. Anyway, so I graduated from Paul Laurence Dunbar High School, where the mascot was a Mighty Men. And I just absolutely love that school. Being in marching band, that's where I wrote my first music. It was for jazz band. I also wrote things for small string ensembles. I wrote marching music. I learned Sousa marches that I absolutely love. I just love that whole culture. And then
What was your instrument?
I played trumpet.
Okay.
In marching band. I played trumpet and French horn in the concert band. And then I played flute in jazz band. And I did that because I knew I wanted to be a composer. So I wanted to study each family of instruments. Guitar was my first instrument. I learned guitar when I was 9 years old. And so, and I made my debut at the Tiki Room, playing for my mother's tea, and that was like on not Cermak, it's more like 23rd Street in Michigan, right next door from Quinn Chapel, which is another big historic place in Chicago. And then I went to Roosevelt University, which is in Chicago, and I went to DePaul University, and I went to New York University. So that's Oh, and I also went to Northwestern and IIT because, of course, I had to study journalism and design because those are the things that put food on my table.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, good. So you've got plenty of Chicago cred, so that's why you're here. And with that in mind, pizza, thick or thin?
Both.
Oh,
Wafer thin if it's Blaze pizza. I know that's a cuss word to a lot of people.
no, I was going to ask you which one you like. That's great.
I like Blaze pizza. I love Blaze pizza, but I also like, Eduardo's is not around anymore. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Roots is a new place for me. I like them. I like Giordano's. I like Gino's East sometimes. And I love the place. What is the name of it on Clark Street? Oh man, I love that place. It's Oven Grinders.
Oh,
I,
yeah.
I like
Okay,
I
yeah.
like Oven Grinders. Yeah, I like them.
Is that on Clark or on Lincoln?
Yeah, no. Oven Grinders is on Clark Street. It's stuck in the basement, just south of Francis Parker.
Okay, but it is Clark Street there. Okay, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Lincoln's. No, it is Lincoln. You're wrong. It's by the Bulls Jazz Club.
No, I'd be willing to bet a pizza from Oven Grinders, dear, and you would lose.
Okay,
I'll tell you this. My favorite foods are pizza and popcorn.
There you go. Okay.
So I don't think you want to take that wager.
All right, I'm gonna leave.
But if you do.
Okay. How about hot dogs or Italian beef?
I don't really eat Italian beef. I don't eat beef or pork. And I OD'd on hot dogs as a kid. But when I was eating hot dogs, I liked Oscar Mayer hot dogs.
Okay.
But Greg likes this place called Ziggy's.
Okay.
On Clark Street.
Yeah.
He also likes Riccobeni's Italian beef. And there's another place called Frankie's, and I think Frankie's is in Naperville. So Greg is a person to ask about that. He also liked that place on Clark Street, right off Fullerton. Can't think of the name of it.
Starts with the M. Michaels.
Yeah.
And I'm going to wind up with, I'm going to ask you 4 trivia questions.
Uh-oh.
Don't take it too seriously. Let's just see how you do. I looked online and I saw that Chicago Public Library had some trivia questions that were music based, and so I'm just going to see how we do on this. Okay. So which of these Chicago-based record labels has existed the longest? And I'm going to give them to you in alphabetical order: Alligator Records, Delmark Records, or Wax Track Records.
I'm gonna go with Alligator.
Alligator. It's actually Delmark.
I was gonna say Delmark,
You
and you know what?
Because that's a jazz label. You should have. That should have been like your
And
thing.
because I know the owners too. That's kind of bad.
The new owners or the old owners?
The new owners. Well, I knew the old owners too, but I know the new owners.
Oh, okay. Well, and that was. I love that question was there because I recorded a music video called "Famine" for a reggae artist, Tony Big Red Aiken. We recorded it at Delmark, and it's right here at ChicagoBroadcastingNetwork.com. You can check it out. Got right in the studio.
Okay.
So, which Chicago-born singer was the mother of Saturday Night Live comedian Maya Rudolph?
That's so easy. It's Minnie Riperton.
You got it. I didn't even give you the multiple choice because
No, you didn't have to. Because my gospel teacher, Elsa Harris, used to be she was like what do you call it? The house organist for whatever label Minnie was on.
Okay. I thought it was cute though that when I looked at this, it said that the song "Loving You" was written to distract Maya when she was a young baby.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Isn't that sweet?
That is
about
sweet.
Kids. Okay, what inspired the name of the Chicago band Earth, Wind, and Fire?
I don't know, but I know who their teacher was and their mentor, James Mack.
Okay.
Well, I would say Earth, Wind, and I mean, because of the elements, Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Do you think it was a high school science teacher, an astrological sign of the group's founder, or a passage from the Bible?
I would go with B, astrological.
And you would be right. Maurice White's astrological sign Sagittarius inspired the band's name, according to whatever.
Yeah, they all went to school at Crane. It was Crane High School and then Crane Junior College, and then their teacher James Mack also was the music department at Loop College, which is now here at Washington Library. So I knew those guys and Curtis Mayfield and people like them through him. They're a lot older than I am, but I still, those people, oh my goodness, that's like the golden age of music, all those people that you named.
Yeah, no kidding. And I'm going to give a shout out to Shining Star, which is a tribute band that is just awesome. They do a great job. If you can't hire Earth, Wind, and Fire, check out Shining Star.
Okay.
They were on stage I was video recording. Another group hired me. They were playing at a concert. They asked me if I'd come and videotape them, and they were opening for the Beach Boys, and then Earth, Wind, and Shining Star played before them, and they were so good. I always give a shout out to them if I can.
May I plug my?
Yeah, go throw it in here now. Wait, let's end with that. I'm going to give you my last question.
Oh, okay. Another question. Okay, so far, what is my score? Is that 2 out of 4 or 3 out of 4?
I think you're 3 for 3 right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So no, well, Delmark was a little two. You're 2 for 3. I'm sorry, you wah on Delmark. This should be a no-brainer for you too. Which Chicago folk singer was known as the first lady of the children's folk song and has performed her songs on 7 continents?
It would probably. Oh my God!
I can give you the multiple choice, but
no, you don't have to. I wanted to say Etta James, but I know it's not Etta James, but it is Etta.
You are so close.
Of course.
Not Edna, but Ella.
Oh, Ella Jenkins.
Yeah.
And I wanted to say Etta James, but that would be hilarious.
Yeah, Ella Jenkins for sure.
Ella Jenkins, yes. She was such an icon. I'm always surprised when I hear certain people are from Chicago. And I know when I teach classes like History of Chicago or I teach a Black Arts Movement class, And the kids are like, "Oh, that happened here in Chicago."
Yeah.
It's like they're always so, and I say kids, but most of them are like college age, but they're always so surprised. Anyway,
Well,
my new
so
CD.
yeah, end up with you're gonna plug your new CD, and then we're gonna wind this up. I knew when we started, Julie said, "You and Regina, how long are you gonna go?" I said, "Well, we'll see."
But I'm happy to say that I'm on a new CD called Good News,
Mhm.
and it's African American spirituals and art songs featuring Otello Jefferson, who is a tenor in San Francisco. And I'm in great company, and the only reason my name's listed first is because we're in alphabetical order, but it's myself and Harry T. Burley, who is the father of spirituals, Valerie Capers, a wonderful jazz pianist and composer, Roland Hayes, Hall Johnson, Charles Lloyd, and the list goes on. And the title of the CD is called Good News.
Right. You have the CD there in
Yes,
front of you?
I don't. What I
Okay.
have in front of me is they sent me a text to show me that it's
Gotcha.
been delivered, and so I'll probably have physical copies within a week or so.
Okay. But I'll find a graphic online and see if I can show that. And but good news,
Okay.
I'll put a link up for that. So,
Okay.
and I'll put a link to your website and some of the many things that we talked about here, so our listeners can look at all this stuff and see if there's anything more they would like to learn about Regina Harris Baiocchi. They can go to ChicagoBroadcastingNetwork.com and check out the links. So I'm going to wind this up by saying thank you. And with that, we're going to close this episode by listening to a couple of minutes from Things Change.
Well,
Thanks.
thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, more than I can express.
This was fun.
Hello, my name is Elissa. Welcome to our performance, Things Changed. Let's get started.